And I was hoping that somebody would have joined me while I was sitting here waiting, because I have had this up for about an hour and I've had the live invitation up for that time, but nobody has joined me. So that makes this kind of difficult, as I didn't want to do work today, tonight, this evening, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are. But I do have something prepared in case somebody wasn't here or nobody was here, which is fine. I looked over this once or twice, but I didn't really do anything too in depth with it. But as I was discussing some words, doing word studies, a particular word study, because I am at a point in my commentary where I can be working on it. I don't have to stop myself to think about a completely different section that I'm not working on, but that is kind of what has happened. Is I've come to a point where I would like to look at the psychology of information being presented to somebody, and then whether or not they find new information acceptable that may change what they believe. There are some people that I know that can accept new information as new studies take place and new discoveries are made, and that helps form a complete picture of what's being said, rather than thinking, well, it's not what I was taught. So if I write this commentary and it tells somebody something that they weren't taught, are they going to accept it based on its own merits, not based on does it conflict with what I believe, which is very hard to do, to know if I'm working in a proper way to do that, or if somebody's just going to shut it down because, well, I'm unqualified, or I'm untrustworthy. They don't find themselves in a position where they can believe my work has any credibility to it, or anything like that. But in the meantime, I am here to answer questions related to so on and so forth, what I've been working with. So if you do have questions, just let me know and we can go over that. I can explain things that I have worked on, but I can't. I know I've, in a way, kind of teased what I've worked on by having it up on screen, but it's not in a finished state. It's not even in a presentable state, so I can't just give you my sections of my commentary, but I can talk about my notes and things that are in there. However, unless somebody shows up, I do have right here just a little printout, and unfortunately the author's name is not provided, although it does reference the author, and that this is part of their master thesis, but their name is not provided. So I'm going to do the best I can to present this the way that it is, which is at the very top, it says, the need for teaching the eschatological gospel of both comings of Jesus Christ in the 21st century, not that the comings are in the 21st century, but the teaching of it is in the 21st century. So this, how in the 21st century we teach this. That's what it says at the top. I believe that might be a title, or so on and so forth. And at the bottom, it says copyright David Hebert, I think, 2009. So if that's just the copywriter or the author, I don't know. It could be the author of this, and the section that they used is somebody else's master thesis, because it does say the author's master thesis. But anyway, at 1.2.6, second coming or parousia is what they've put here, which is very misleading because you're already telling me right off the bat that you believe parousia is second coming, and you're not presenting it as if we're going to learn something. And again, the title, if that is indeed the title, the need for teaching the eschatological gospel of both comings of Christ, you're saying, let's not learn this, you teach this. We're not learning it, we're teaching it. So, I mean, there's assumptions to be made either by the position of the person that you're having read this, or by what you think people should be thinking of it, rather than looking into it and studying it. Hey, this is what we believe, teach it. Or you already believe this, so this is how you teach it. So I'm not really sure where that's coming from because I don't have the full information. I just have a printout that someone gave me. But again, it is definitely presumptuous there either way. So it starts in the New Testament Greek. The word coming is mainly represented by two words, parousia and erchomai. Now, already that, like, if you're going to start that and it's sort of switched around, I would say in New Testament Greek, the words parousia and erchomai are mainly represented by the word coming, which would be more factual than saying it's the other way around, as if somehow the English came first. But at the same time, the English translation for these did kind of come first to call it coming and then teach that that's what it is. But, you know, it's complicated. It is complicated. Consider the following definitions taken from the author's master thesis. So that's where that says that. I'm having a little bit of trouble with the gain here, so give me a minute while I adjust some things. I just wanted check. I didn't want. I can hear myself peeking the mic. I'm just trying to find a good balance here, and it's not easy. And now I know why I had the gain down. Check. Yeah, exactly. Okay. I think about there. This mic is meant to be right up next to me and the volume kind of low, but I'm trying to have it far away. Okay, going back a little bit. What they're saying is that the words parousia and erchomai are the words for coming. And consider the following definitions taken from the author's master thesis, although they didn't name the author, so I'm a little troubled there. But I'm sure somebody can find it if they look for this. And they start with parousia, but I'm going to start with erchomai because this is closer to correct, although there is, again, an assumption inside of it. So erchomai means to come. Yes. To go. Yes. Move or pass along. Yes. In transit. Yes. In transit in any direction. That was all one. So yes, they abbreviate a lot of things in this. As marked by the adjuncts are often simply by the context. The forms from Elfin, let's take it over, however, more frequently signify to come. Yes. And then it says, in a future sense, apparently, and I'm not adding the word apparently there. It says, in a future sense, comma, apparently, comma, but only of what is certain to take place, referencing John 4:25, John 14:3 and 30, Revelation 1:7. The one who was, and then in parentheses, or had been, yeah, and the coming one. Revelation 1:4-8, and Revelation 4:8. But it's the one who was and is to come. And then later in Revelation, it just says the one who was and is. It doesn't say and is to come more than once, I think. Maybe twice. I can't remember, but I do know that it stops saying and is to come at some point in Revelation. So epi upon, with implying the rest, too many derivatives. Let's see, is advent, coming, katarkamai, to come down. But and then there's a reference there that's outside of the Bible. But to say in the sense of to come again, back, or return, what they're referencing there is, Matthew 24:30, upon the clouds. And then it markets derivatives that what Urkamai on its own is not a comeback unless you're going to say that it could be applied come back or return in every instance of its use. But then you run into a bunch of problems. Greek is a lot more complex than that. It's more or refined than that. It has words for come back or return that are not Urkamai. And in any instance that I've seen Urkamai, there's no need to say that this is a comeback or a return. And yet it seems like they're making that assumption, but it's kind of hard to tell when they abbreviate a bunch of things. But anyway, Urkamendon, the noun form of Urkamai, is also translated coming or arrival. Two of the three other Greek words used in the New Testament in association with the second coming were mentioned above in the definition of parousia: epiphania and apocalypsis, which those two words, epiphania and apocalypsis, absolutely not. Appearing, made manifest, revealing something is not it. If you already have the theology and you see that, then you're going to say, yeah, this fits. But it's not a mental gymnastic. It's like a superstition at that point that you're confirming by seeing something that you can be like, oh yeah, I could see how that would be his return. But those words used outside of that, are you going to say that those are also returns? Christ being revealed to man is not Christ being second coming to man. So his epiphany, his manifestation to us, or apocalypsis and things like that, you're going to tie that word to a return when that's not the proper use of that word. That's when you're getting into, let me confirm my bias by applying as many things as I can to that. It's kind of a stretch. So then again, to tie in parousia, when they don't even cover epiphany or apocalypse, they just don't even cover it in this. They may later, but they don't in this. The third is which is basically the same thing. I can't pronounce it. I don't know why they say the third. Meaning to make apparent, manifest, known, show openly. And that's an outside reference again. Another term that relates to the Perusia is, this is funny. Another term that relates to the Perusia is Maranatha. I think I pronounced that correctly. This word is a Greek transliteration of two Aramaic words, Maran, meaning Lord, and Atha, meaning has come. The funny part of this is that they are supporting a side that would not separate that one word into those two parts, but rather separate it into different parts that say, come, O Lord, not our Lord has come. And this he's supporting is not in support of a second coming, but rather that Paul is saying that our Lord has come. It's already happened, which is true. If he believes in Jesus and that Jesus is the Lord, then he believes the Lord has come. But if he believes the Lord is coming back, then you would separate the word differently to say, "O Lord, come," not "Our Lord has come," or "Come, O Lord," instead of "Our Lord has come." And then, of course, it says the only place that the word appears in the Bible is in 1 Corinthians 16:22. However, it is alluded to in Revelation 22:20 and mentioned in the Didache 10:6. There's also other definitions are as follows: our Lord has come, but you just said, Lord has come, is how you separate it. Indicating the approaching judgment when the Lord returns. Our Lord has come, indicating the approaching judgment. It's like they don't even hear themselves as they talk. They can understand something by breaking it down. It's like they studied that and then we're like, now let me apply what I've been taught to this. Let me ignore what it says, but tell you what I've been told it says. Anyway, let me go to Perusia. I'm having a little fun with this because it's late and my head's not in the right place. I feel like falling asleep, and the only way I can not is to get some energy here. So I apologize if that puts you off. Perusia means present presence. I'm kind of a being present, also kind of. A coming to a place, absolutely not. Presence, coming or arrival, no. A technical term used for the coming of Christ, no. Now, I don't think they do a real job at all at presenting why it has two definitions that are not describing the same thing, really. But they kind of have to, because there are some instances in which you can say that Perusia absolutely does not mean a coming to a place, coming or arrival, or even is referred to or referring to Christ. So, present presence, a being present, presence, you got to put that in there. But if those instances didn't exist, then we wouldn't have any precedent for saying that it doesn't only mean coming to a place or whatever, and so on and so forth. But I can tell you that every instance that I've encountered so far could apply in a sense, present presence, of being present or presence, without it being a coming to a place, a coming or arrival, or a technical term used for a second coming. And I've not seen anybody describe it in a way that makes me think that, oh, okay, well, yeah, right there you go. That's it. And so far, your strongest locations, you're going to have 1 Thessalonians 4:15, 2 Peter 1:16, 2 Peter 3:12, because it's Perusian, and I have not looked at those yet. So if you want to say that anything means second coming, advent, or arrival, or coming to a place, that's going to be your variation of that word that fits that. No other variations of the word can definitively say is not just a special kind of presence. And again, a special kind of presence. There's going to be more words. If I were to actually define the word, if I were to translate the word, I would need a sentence to fill that space. But we could just understand it's a special presence and move on with that. But, keeping in mind what the definition is. And I can get to that later. So they say the technical term used for the second coming of Christ in reference to Matthew 24:3, which if you look at what Mark and Luke write down in place of Perusia, you know that it is not about a coming in Matthew 24:3. So this is going to be in, was it Mark 13, Luke 21? But of course, they don't use the word Perusia. They say, when will these things take place? And so, it's the same language there, is what I'm getting at. They also say 1 Corinthians 15:23, 1 Thessalonians 2:19, 2 Thessalonians 2:8, 2 Peter 3:4, which they even missed Perusian. 1 John 2:28, the Son of Man, in reference to the Son of Man rather than Christ. Matthew 24:27, 37, and 39. They missed 30. The Lord. So 1 Thessalonians 3:13, 4:15, 5:23, 2 Thessalonians 2:1, James 5:7-8, 2 Peter 1:16. And the day of God, 2 Peter 3:12. Well, that's weird. So they did apply Perusian to 2 Peter 3:12, but in reference to the Lord. So, and then they say the term Perusia refers to the second coming of the Lord, but the second series of events. I wouldn't necessarily say series of events, but I get what they're talking about, and I kind of agree with that. We can understand which event is referred to only by a careful examination of the context in which the terms Perusia or Urkomai, to come, occur, which is, again, funny because they didn't take careful examination of what they were saying. The coming of the Lord at the end of the 7-year tribulation period is what the Lord describes in Matthew 24. There's no 7 years in Matthew or Mark or Luke, but this is that conversation. I don't know where they get 7 years. They're probably applying a completely different prophet's words to something like that. The judgment of the Lord is designated as a specific coming by the verb I don't have my glasses. Well, hello there. Welcome. You caught me filling time. if you would like to come on and talk, that would save me from reading more of this. I've read it a couple times. I just wanted to address it when I try to study outside information. I just come across things like this. And everybody seems to agree with one another, but nobody seems to actually study anything. I get the 7 years from Daniel, which is a bunch of nonsense because I should have been done. You know what? I might be able to find this. I don't know if I should air it. Tried to have a show last weekend, begging futurists to come on and just walk me through their interpretation of Daniel 9 and tell me how they arrived at these conclusions they arrived at. I do have something for you on that. See if I can figure out how to pull this up. And I'm going to have to find it. So I hope you bear with me on it. I could give you a summary, but I'm not good at that. But it's something like, how would you come to these conclusions if your pastor didn't tell you the 70 weeks was about the Antichrist? Right, exactly. So there's like a correlation with the Hebrew counting of this sort of thing. No, I'm thinking of 144,000. So there's in the Hebrew, you'll have a way of calculating like an innumerable number, an uncountable number, everything of everything. You'll have an Aramaic way of doing it, and then you'll have a Greek way of doing it, which is where we get that in Revelation, which is the 144,000, and then of course halving that calculation of the 12 times whatever, it comes out with 666, which is fascinating because that means that the 144,000 is imperishable and the 666 is half of that, which is the perishable. Then he was also talking about, and I'm talking about a video that Rob put out recently where he actually explained this stuff because he was talking to some Jehovah's Witness stuff. And the counting of Daniel's stuff, when that comes up, I'll know. The counting of Daniel's stuff is like 3.5 years, but it's also something that happened within Daniel's time. And the conclusion was apocalyptic in nature, not just an oracle. So double meanings of the Old Testament, and that's how the New Testament writers liked, especially Matthew, talking about something that may have been relevant in the Old Testament at the time, but then has new relevance in Jesus, as he says, Jesus did this to fulfill this, even though that may have been fulfilled at the time or in Matthew's past. It also has a meaning in being fulfilled in Jesus. So the Daniel prophecy, there is an event that correlates to the 3.5 years. But then if you're looking at how it applies to the future, it's actually that it's bigger and better for us in the future what comes about when we're talking about the temple. Like, why do we limit ourselves to thinking that, it's got to be exactly like it was in this prophecy? It's got to be exactly like Ezekiel described it, when it's actually just better than that, which is great. And that's my very poor summarization. But it's like a 2.5 hour video that I got to find this in. Here's, okay, no. Okay, I found the Daniel's vision thing, the time periods. It may have been an ad. It may have been not something that Rob addressed directly, but rather a video that he was showing. There's too much information. I actually don't think I can find it. Not. Okay. Now let me see if I can actually share this. I may have hit the right spot, but I need to add.
Hey, if all this background noise winds up being too loud, you can just kick me from the show because I'm driving. I know, like, this company vehicle I'm driving around in, it sometimes gets a little loud.
Yeah. Not sure how to add. You know what I think I can do here? Oh, well, I wouldn't be able to add audio. Yeah, I'm not sure how to add a YouTube video to this.
Are you using StreamYard?
Yeah.
Okay, so what you would do is you would click share screen. I normally just share the whole screen. I feel like that's easier. And so I'll click share screen, and then you make sure you got that audio part clicked, to share audio. But I think StreamYard, I don't know if they fixed this yet, but I know for a while it wasn't saying on and off. So it's like you had to kind of like guess, is it on or not? but I don't know if that's popping up. But normally that's how it would work. I would just click share the entire screen, and
Okay. I don't see a way to do audio yet.
is it playing? Is the audio playing right now?
I don't have it on, no.
Okay, because I see the video. Just if you want, you can just click play, and I can tell you if it's actually coming through or not.
Okay.
So is the audio supposed to be playing right now?
Yeah. So it wasn't playing.
I can't hear it.
Okay.
So there should be like something, man. It looks like a little slider. It's right as you're sharing the screen. I think it's like right before you click the part where it actually pops up on the screen. There's like a slider there that you got to make sure it's slid over. So you might have to take this back off, then go to share entire screen. And when you go to that section where you're picking share the entire screen, there should be like a little tab. I think it's on the bottom right hand side of the screen, and you would slide that over to share audio.
I don't see any of that.
Ah, man. I'll have to get a hold of you sometime, or maybe I'll make a done, because there should be a way I can share my screen as I do it, so you can see how to do it.
All right. But I was going to say something along the lines of, what he's saying, kind of as it happens if you can't hear it. But
yeah, because I'm not hearing anything right now if it's playing.
okay, so this graphic that he has, though, does show that like the Daniel 9, 26a and 26b is very comfortably within the war with the Romans in AD 66. Or, you got AD 26, AD 66. With those things happening. So it involved desolating war in the lands for roughly 7 years, beginning at Caesarea in 66 AD, lasting until the final results. So that's the like the correlating. I could just say, it's in there. If you were, since I don't know how to share the audio, I can't really repeat what he's saying.
Oh yeah, that's pretty hard, man. Unless you got a photographic memory.
Yeah, but there is, it's a 2.5 hour video, and it's only a part 1 where he's talking to Jehovah's Witness and addressing that. It's like this rabbit hole thing into that, because they go along the same thing, which is, what I've been working with in eschatology, where they have a very different idea of things, I guess, but their idea mostly spawns from the same place, which is this, like, of course they're I think premillennial, but they still have this view of this second coming, and they tried to date it, and because it didn't work out that way, because the first date was before World War One, and then World War One comes around, and it's like, well, and then a new calculation is made, and then World War II happens, and it's like, well, again. But instead of just saying, oh, well, it didn't happen, they just said, oh, well, it happened invisibly.
Oh my gosh, that's like Seventh Day Adventist type stuff, man.
Right.
Because that's what they did. They had that great disappointment in 1844, and they were supposed to see Jesus. It didn't happen in October of 1844, so he said, "Oh, it happened in heaven."
Right. So instead of just, besides uncomfortably trying to date something, it goes way deeper, where I noticed something in one of their older publications when they thought the people who were alive at that day would never die. And this was many years ago. A lot of them are dead. Some of them are just very old, still alive, but most of them are dead. I think it was 70 something years ago, but in one of their publications, they said those that love their life on the earth and want to continue it, or something like that.
Which group of people are you talking about?
Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, okay.
So
wow. So
it was in
that's
the
real
Watchtower
similar to.
publication.
That's real weird, man. I don't know much about Jehovah's Witness, but I almost couldn't tell the difference if this was something you were trying to say about Seventh Day Adventists, or so I just think it's kind of wild. There's a lot of similarity. There seems to be some similarity there.
Yeah. And I don't know much about Seventh Day Adventist, and I didn't know much about Jehovah's Witness until this conversation had started. I was on a stream with Rob, and this person joined when Rob was looking to close the stream down, but then because they were fascinating to talk to, it went on for a couple more hours. And then he had a chat with them, I believe, on his Discord, so it was open to people who were there to come in and ask questions. But he was just asking these questions and explaining a lot of things, and even how, and because they'll receive this, what they call new light, when they need to make corrections to their theology, because maybe somebody from the outside comes in and says, well, hey, look at this kind of contradicts everything that you believe.
Oh gosh.
Right. And then they need a way to make it fit, I guess. So they'll pray about it and then receive new light that tells them how it fits with what they already believe, which to me, again, is along with this paper that I got, there's a lot of superstition and confirmation bias in it. Especially when there are things that they haven't corrected yet, because they'll see Jesus, the Son, and Jehovah as different. Like they can't be the same person. But in one verse where I think Timothy is crying out for Jesus to take his soul, the next verse he calls him Jehovah. And
Okay,
and
so and you saying Jehovah's Witness, they got to be two different people, right?
Right. And when they
Okay.
see that it says that, because they don't know that hasn't been correct, because one version they corrected it to Jehovah, but in the one before that you kind of can't, because it does say Jesus in the Greek, but they're taking that form of Lord. In English we'll have Lord when you see it, not capital L and then lowercase ORD, but all cap, sometimes italicized. That is a replacement for Yahweh. but I've heard two different versions of where the pronunciation Jehovah comes from, and I'm not sure which one's more accurate right now. There's one version of it where you have Yahweh and whatever the pronunciation for Lord was, and it's just kind of combined, and then it comes out with Yahovah. But then I've heard somebody else say the actual pronunciation of YHWH is Yahovah. And then that's where Jehovah comes from. But the actual pronunciation, I don't believe the actual pronunciation of that would be Yahovah, because there's a cultural context to that name being thought of as a name, because it's not a name. It's not a proper noun. It's the beginning of a statement made by like a third person. It's not even a first person statement. So I guess it would have to start with Moses. So Moses asks, who do I tell them sent me? Now, God would be saying, tell them I am. And instead of giving a name, he repeats it. I am sent you. Culturally, what would happen if somebody was sent by a deity, the deity, let's say Hermes, would say, tell them I am Hermes. So then they would go back and say, I was sent by I am Hermes, or Hermes, or whatever in English we would say that. But here's the problem. Because Moses was only given I am and not a name, but rather sort of an idea to say that I am nameless and I am all, so I can't give you a name, so tell them I am, and that's all you have. If Moses went down the hill and said, I am, then they would think Moses was talking about himself. So he can't.
Right.
So there's a shortened at that yod. So Moses is saying, in a way, they said I am, but because Hebrew is limited, it comes out with Yahweh. So
man, that's interesting.
Yeah. So there is a cultural context to that you have to consider, which I don't see a lot of people considering when they actually look into that.
Yeah, I never heard anyone bring that up.
I've heard that from two sources now. The most recent source that I heard that from was Michael Heiser, because I saw it in a video with Chuck Missler talking about how it's Yahovah or Yahovah. And then Michael Heiser was explaining why he believes it's Yahweh. And I wasn't hearing Chuck address the cultural implications of it, or sort of the way that name would be presented, because if Moses was saying that he would be referring to himself. And then Heiser addressed it, and I was like, well, that makes sense. He's actually, as an ancient Near Eastern scholar, he has information of cultures outside of the biblical writers and the Hebrew people and things like that. So he would understand that there was a way of introducing who sent you that is part of that. And the other one, the first time that I had heard that, was in the same person who explained where you have Yahweh and Lord being combined to make Yahovah. So, I mean, take it as you will. There's two people that have added in this idea that it's a third person thing. And one of them also said something that I haven't heard anyone else repeat, which is a combination of words. So,
nah, man, that gives me something to go look into. because that I don't know. I think it's interesting because I'm starting to kind of learn a little bit more about Hebrew and stuff. So
Well, I'm learning something about the Greek. Let me go get my notes because this is fun. I got a
oh,
piece
by
of
the way, I
paper.
gotta go pretty soon because I gotta do different things at my job, so I can't be having like a headphone set on and things like that.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll run real quick.
Right. I mean, I'll listen back to the show, but I'm just letting you know, man. Like when I have to start these other tasks and everything, man, I'm gonna have to put the phone on pause and stuff. But I'll definitely listen back to what you say and share and everything.
I turned on the wrong light and grabbed the wrong notes. I've been doing a few studies into Greek as much as I can, and I was looking into John 20, I think, maybe 22. Just because we were finishing John, whoa, maybe 21, 22. Jesus, yeah. So Jesus said to him, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." And I was like, well, this is a very curious statement uh, for many
Yeah,
different
yeah, that
reasons.
one is. Yeah.
But when I was looking at the Greek, really want someone to help. I want to watch somebody translate this from the Greek because I spent many hours on just this one verse, breaking it down and trying to turn it into English to see if I would come up with the same thing. And I kind of didn't. And then I also looked at some commentaries. So the remain until I come, or if you get into King James, it says tarry. But the word remain, it is a word that means continue. And then until I come is in a commentary, somebody said that this is like a phrase that references sort of a foreverness. So it's like, if I want him to continue forever, what is that to you? But then, even more so, Jesus said to him, which I don't agree that it says Jesus said to him, because the word there, atone, I can't pronounce that. It's not a typical word for him. It's a word for himself. So it's kind of like Jesus isn't saying it directly to Peter. He's just kind of saying it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But then at the same time, it says, as the actual statement, if it is my will, and there, that my will part is sort of like the word desire. If it is desire that he remain, and here's the funny thing that they do. Jesus said to him, if it is my desire. They took the himself, moved the self over to the word desire. And that may be a correct way to translate that out of the Greek, but I feel like it's more of just a comment that Jesus says, not necessarily to Peter, but just saying it. So Jesus said to himself, uh, if it's if it's the desire of him to live forever, and then they have a comma after that, what is that to you, or is that your, what is that business of yours, or something? But what is that? Those three words I don't think really fit, because if you look at the word that's used for that, it's used for like something, like the word something. And here they have what is that, because it's a question, but then the word something is still applied to any translations where it is a question. So it's kind of like something to you. I don't think there's really a need for a comma there. He's just saying, in the air, if I want him to live, is my desire for him anything to you? And then he says as a statement, and then you have that word you ending of the very typical you, as in somebody who's like part of the conversation but not really there, So it is kind of like supporting that in the air comment. But then the next you is very directional. It's a very personal kind of you where he's looking at Peter and says, "You follow me." Because that is his instructions to Peter, while Peter's worrying about other people. So he's just getting him to stop worrying about what any plans are for anyone else, because Peter's job is to follow Jesus.
Oh wow, yeah, man. I mean, that sounds right.
Except I mean, however I translate it, I want to watch somebody translate it from the Greek so I can see if they follow the same kind of thought process that I was following, and look at the things that I was looking at. So like the word for him being himself, and the word for remain or tarry being continue. They're having no need for an actual comma between that and what is that being something, and the personalization of the word you at the very end of that. But Hebrew, I can't do that with Hebrew. There's just not enough there.
Yeah, I don't really know. I think I got it, and then it's like, I don't know. I asked the AI, I'm like, does this sound right to you? And that AI is like, no, and all. But you can't just trust the AI right off the bat. You have to go back, ask it again, ask it in different ways.
Yeah.
And then it's like, that's one thing, man. Maybe you could use the AI and say, could you walk me through, like, go get real descriptive about how you want to be walked through. And maybe it could be like, hey, if you were a translator, how would a translator walk me through this, and see what it says, give them that verse. And maybe that might be
sure
one way of doing it. Because are you familiar with using things like Bing AI or Chat GPT? I would personally use Bing AI, but
I haven't used those things. But one of the things that I did a couple years ago was I put into a translator Genesis 1:1 using for I thought I had that with me. But the first word for in the beginning, I had one version of that entire verse with a definite article on the word beginning, and one without a definite article, and it translated it exactly the same way. So I think if there's no information to say otherwise, because every translation does this almost exactly the same, I think AI is just going to defer to the work that it can find rather than being able to start from the ground and translate a sentence.
But I'm wondering if you could ask it, if you were a translator, what would it look like if you walked me through how a translator translates? I want you to walk me through exactly like how a translator would walk me through how they came to this conclusion. And the AI might be able to do that. And then, but also give them that sentence, but phrase it like that. I know that's like kind of, because I have to do the what would it look like? Because sometimes if I ask it a different way, it'd do it. It'd get real weird. So sometimes it's like you could say something similar, but if you depending on the way you state something, it has a big effect of getting the AI to do it or not.
Yeah, I've heard that with some people, and I probably mentioned this to you about this last time. Somebody was working on a card game, and they wanted a certain script to make the cards do something in this program. And they asked AI to script it for them, and it didn't quite work. So they had to adjust it by saying, because it did this other thing, change it to make it more like this, and they just went back and forth with it until it finally scripted something that worked the way that they wanted it to. Because
it takes a little bit working with the AI to finally like get it down to like, okay, now I'm finally understanding how to word things to get it to do what I want it to do. So it does take a little bit of work to start to figure out, but I mean it can help you, but you also like, dude, especially when it's something like biblical, you got to double check it. Even if you think, oh, I just asked it a simple thing like, what did the early church fathers believe about Daniel 9? And they say, oh yeah, I believe so. They believe Hippolytus and all these other people believed it was fulfilled by Jesus, you know. And then you go look at it, it's like, no, some of them were casting the 7th week into the future and all that. And so now, you know, it's like, so you can't just to give you a warning, you can't just go straight by. You got to make sure you double check.
It's also working off of, like, it will pull information from translations of people that already have a bias, which is a problem.
That too. Oh yeah, dude. It's like when I go to
the whole thing that I started with today, this printout that I got, this person seems to start with an idea, and instead of saying, let's work through this and explain how these things mean this, it's just, we believe this, so let's teach it.
Right, because part of the problem with that AI, I will have to go in a second.
Okay.
Part of the problem with that AI is that it's better if there's like a book or something you like maybe a couple authors. These authors here, it's the whole entire web.
Your audio cut out. Yeah, I think it.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that, man. I had to walk. I had to walk away for a second. But hey, I gotta let you go. So good talking to you. I'll listen to the show when you know.
Well, nobody else has come by, so I really don't have much else to do today. I didn't want to work.
Well, hey man, I really gotta let you go. So good talking to you, man, and maybe talk to you some more later or something or some other time.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Guess I could go over. I'm just going to check and see if there was anything else in this that I wanted to talk about, because really, most of what they're ending with is the "Our Lord come" or "Lord come quickly" and things like that. Our Lord come, the other one being I just saw it. Excuse me. Oh, our Lord has come, or our Lord come. It appears that the statement is exclamatory statement used by the apostles as an encouragement to the church, meaning Lord Jesus come, and referred to the parousia, but again, only if you first believe that the presence isn't among you already. And then therefore, anytime they talk about something, that must be what they're referring to. Therefore, when we consider all the terms related to the second coming or advent of Christ, it's and then again, all the terms, like they haven't even explained how Urkomai is a second coming. They just kind of like talked about what it means and said, by the way, of course you already believe that though. So teach it. And all the events related to it, including the rapture of the church. So this person does believe in a rapture as well. Parousia is the most commonly used word to describe all that they entail and will be used from this point forward to convey that concept. It's a little pushy there, especially if you haven't even really broken down why. Please note that the term apocalyptic gospel may be used to express the same thought as eschatological gospel. And no, I don't believe that. However, because apocalyptic literature and apocalyptic gospel would be different meanings. So you could say Daniel is apocalyptic literature because it's a prophecy because it's from a prophet. 2, it's an oracle because it tells of the future. And 3, it's apocalyptic because it has a second meaning that is revealed later on, because these things are shown, revealed, the veil is lifted in Christ. Therefore, it is an apocalyptic literature. It is not apocalyptic because it is always for the future. That is not what that means. And that's why, John's apocalypse is translated to be revelation because it is revealing of what was hidden, not because it is hiding what is to be in the future. And that's why I also see John's apocalypse, that book, being written after 70 AD, because it's about the hidden things that had happened. It's not about what is hidden right now and is to come, because then you're not revealing anything by that nature. And then apocalyptic gospel, the gospels are telling of Jesus's life, not the Jesus that will someday be here. So it's not an apocalyptic gospel. It's the good news, not the soon news. May be used to express the same thought as eschatological gospel. However, due to the above definition of apocalypsis, he didn't really put an above definition, by the way. Or rather, it wasn't included in this section, which was 1.2.6. So it may have started before that. So this could be just a concluding section that has covered that before. And the connotation of the Apocalypse of John, or the book of Revelation in the Bible, eschatological gospel remains the term best used to convey the concept outlined in this thesis and will be used henceforth. Okay, so it's not the end. I don't know. I read this twice through, now 3 times through. It makes me wonder again. I mean, I already understand the psychology of believing in a second coming, how that comes about, where they get their information, and then how my absolute best example for something like this that I've ever used and I continue to use to this day is let's take an art professor. Now, they were taught that purple is a particular color and yellow is also a color. And all the world agrees on those terms. You have purple, you have yellow. And they hold up a purple crayon and they hold up a yellow crayon. Now, they're a professor. They have the degree. They have the authority to teach whatever they want to teach related to their degree. And their degree involves it's an art degree. They have the authority to teach colors. So they hold up the purple crayon and say to their students, this is yellow. And they hold up the yellow crayon and say to their students, this is purple. And let me tell you something. If you do not agree with that, you do not pass this class and cannot teach. Okay, so their students agree, regardless of what all of the rest of the world knows at this point, what that professor knows, because they know they're wrong, but that's what they're going to teach. And they're going to demand that their students believe that, or they don't pass. Okay. So their students decide to believe it because they want to pass. Those who don't have to leave. So now, because of that, they get the degree. And now they have the authority to teach and decide pretty much whether purple is purple and yellow is yellow, or the purple is actually yellow and the yellow is actually purple. And you're going to have some that continue that and some that don't. So the ones that continue it are sort of like an infection to the idea, because the rest of the world does not agree on this. They did not take that class. But guess what? They got the degree agreeing to that. So you have two sides that can argue. But the more everyone else is already teaching yellow is yellow, purple is purple. But the more this comes down, because somebody's going to be, in a sense, brainwashed into that idea. This professor must know what he's talking about. They have the degree. They're the authority on this. I learned it from them, so now I will teach it as well. So one of those people who gets that degree, who passes that class, goes for that degree and goes to teach, will then teach what they were taught. This, which is a purple crayon, they hold it up, they say, this is yellow. And they hold up the yellow one and say, this is purple. And guess what? If you don't agree with that, you don't pass my class. And that's final. So then their students have to agree with it, because guess what? That's what they were taught. And they may actually believe it at that point, because they don't have the original information from the person that taught them, who decided to lie and teach it like it was truth. Okay, well, now their students, somewhat very confused, have two levels of authority telling them this is the truth. So they come up with the same problem. Do I believe it and stay and pass, or rather accept it and stay and pass, sometimes believe it, or do I leave? Well, those that believe it and pass because they want the credit, they want the experience, and they learn that, and some of them could be brainwashed into that, they continue on again, and then they're a third authority on down to teach the same thing, which is wrong. Now, years and years and years, or generations and generations pass, and there's somebody teaching still to this day. Hold up the purple crayon. This is yellow. Hold up the yellow crayon. This is purple. And then somebody says, no, it's not. And they say, yes, it is. I have a degree. You don't. You're the student. I'm the teacher. And I'm telling you this. And they say, no. But it's not. Because the rest of the world has already defined what those are. And you're against what they believe. So what's the actual problem here? Well, the problem isn't that somebody in the past decided to lie and then enforce this idea as being something that they believe. But the problem is that there's a breakdown of communication because someone believes that their authority must remain. I was taught this. This teaching is what gave me this position. I am teaching it because I now have this position. I will not accept information otherwise. They are separating themselves from what is actually going on there, which is that these things have already been labeled and named and agreed upon by the majority outside of their minority. And they refuse to accept anything else. That's the problem. It's just that generation of authority can decide, despite what information everyone else has, can decide that something is other than what it is, or other than what it is agreed upon in society. And they are separating themselves from society in that. So is there a way to reach that person and help them understand that it's time to stop teaching that? Because they don't agree. You won't find anyone outside of this line of this I was going to say institution, this line of generational teaching. You won't find anyone outside of this university or whatever who agrees with you with something as simple as labeling and defining colors. So now we get to, well, how does this apply to what I'm talking about? So if the word Perusia at a time meant something other than what we are teaching today, and somebody comes along and says, no, that's actually not how that word is used. Look at the past and look how that word is used. Even look at the people who define the word. They will still use proper definition because it's still in there. And then remove yourself from what you are taught and just look at the facts. These things have definitions. These things fit with those definitions, and your idea that you're trying to insert does not fit. How do we reach that person? What is the psychology of that? Are they willing to accept it, or are they just stuck with their authority and saying, well, that's not what I was taught, and I have the authority. I have the degree. My teacher has the authority to tell me that they were correct. Their teacher had the authority to tell them that they were correct, even though at some point there may have been, an origin of this that was a lie. Or maybe somebody was separated from the actual definition of it and they just got it confused. And then we're put in a position of authority to then teach it. And what we have is, and I haven't looked at it yet because I feel like I'm not going to find an answer. If the word Perusia was used in the same way as it is in the New Testament, after the New Testament, after those writings, after the Gospels, after the epistles of Paul, after even Revelation, whatever the last direct connection to the apostles was to this word and its use. After that, so Justin Martyr, maybe, if he's using the same language and applying it to the same sentences, saying the same thing, then it's not, you can't say, well, look, he agrees it's the second coming, because he's just saying the same thing. If it's not second coming, then he's not saying second coming. If it is second coming and he's saying the same thing, then it is second coming. But you can't use that kind of work to say, look, this person agrees with it. So then language changes. And at what point will we be able to find someone who actually says second coming, that says that this is about Jesus's return? Where does that first appear? Because if we can look at that, we can look at what they believed, actually use that as information for the first appearance of this belief. And then what did they believe? And I think what you're going to find is somewhere, maybe, what was it? Actually have that up here somewhere. You're probably not going to find it within the first 1,000 years AD. Unfortunately. I might not even have this down. Even Josephus uses it without talking about a second coming. Look at yeah. I thought I had written this down because you got Justin Martyr 150. If he's still using it in the same sense, then you're not getting it out of that. Well, I do have a note here that says belief in the second coming was popularized in the U.S. in the late 19th century by the evangelist, Dwight L. Moody, and the premillennial interpretation became one of the core components of Christian fundamentalists in 1920s. But that they're talking about a popularization of it, so it's probably something that person had information about. So wherever they got their information, you're just tracing it back as far as you can where the language is different than the original language. So if you're not dealing in Greek, if you're dealing in something that's separated from the actual tradition of teaching something, and then the idea comes around that, oh, hey, look at this. This is probably, oh, wow, Jesus is coming back. Where are you going to find that? And I'm looking at my work and wanting to do work, but I don't want to do work. So I'm going to close this. And then, of course, the big question there, what is the psychology behind presenting somebody with the information that says, hey, that's not what this is. Let's actually look at what it says. And then if they still conclude or they still believe, like, well, that's not what I've been taught, then did I fail? Or did they fail? Or like what's actually going on within somebody's mind who stops to say, but my teaching, but the degree, but you don't have the authority to say that. because I got to get past that. I got to find not just people who will get past it, because those people will just be called a heretic along with me, but rather find a way to present the information, which is, interestingly enough, if I can present this information outside of the context of me talking about it being a second coming, if I show them the word parousia and its definition, if I show them the Urkomai and where it takes place in scripture, and then ask them where, ask them then to describe their eschatology to me when I've already covered those things that they will likely bring up, will they then see that maybe they weren't taught what they should have been taught, or rather they were missing information and now they have to rethink it? Or are they just going to be like, well, but I already know, so I can't go back? Because then I start to think this entire idea is cultic. So I see that you have come back, but I don't know how long you've been here, and you didn't say anything. So I wonder if I put you back on the stage, are you ready?
Yeah. Yeah. I just got back for a few minutes, man. So it's no big deal.
Okay.
I'm just driving around working, man. So it's like, it's no big deal. If you kept me hanging for like a half hour, I'd still be listening. So.
Okay. Yeah, I was just I don't know how much of that you heard. I was just trying to talk about what I'm dealing with next. It's not even next, because next is I know what I'm going to write, but it's like in my mind I'm thinking ahead and I haven't written anything because I want to understand the psychological implications of bringing someone information that is against their teaching. Are they going to accept new information, or are they going to just be like, well, it's not what I was taught?
Yeah, I'm having that issue a lot. Because I do that, because I do politics too, man, where it's like I'm presenting things in a clear way. I'm like, there's really no other way you can get around what this is, and people will fight it, like, and so it's like, and so I don't know, man, like and then it's like now that I'm starting to do eschatology, I'm finding like the same exact mindset. So I haven't figured out what the best way to approach that is.
Yeah. One of the things that I found very helpful so far, and I haven't really had a whole lot of opportunity to try this, was I worked through 2 instances, because Urkomai, I think I've got that down. That's written the best I can possibly write it and explain it and show that that is not what people think it is. And I did that by going over it and finding out that, okay, I need to explain this one part better. And I did. But as far as Perusia goes, which is the hang on, I think, for most people, because they'll say, like, well, what about, like, okay, I've covered that. If I remove the topic, so I don't even talk about second coming, I just want to talk about the word Perusia, because most people aren't going to know that word is what they apply, or what they associate with second coming.
Right. I think that's a great idea, man.
Right. And then there's 2 places that I'll bring up. One where 1 Corinthians 16-17, where Paul is talking about 3 people, starting with Stephanus, Fortuitous, and I forget the third. But he's talking about their Perusia, and there is, if you look at the sentence, they are already with him, but the word is translated in English as coming, as they are coming to him instead of just being with him. But they are very clearly with him. and he is delighted or glad or joyful or comforted. That's what it was. He's comforted by their Perusia. And then also 2 Corinthians 7:6, where he's talking about Titus and his Perusia. And again, this is a situation where Titus is with him, not coming to him, but it is again translated coming, as if Titus is on his way to Paul, which is, it conflicts. It's a huge conflict with the sentence that is describing Titus actually being there with Paul at that time. So what I've done is I've talked about these instances in which Perusia is used and how it's a word for like a very special presence. This is something, so Stephanus can only comfort Paul because of the comfort that he received. His presence there is special because no one but these three people can give Paul that comfort by being there. So that makes it a Perusia. It's a very special being there. It's like, okay, so presence doesn't really quite fit, but it does fit because they are present. But it's a special presence. And then if I get them to accept that, because that is what it's saying, and then I say, okay, now Perusia is not a second coming, and yet it's translated coming. Can you explain your eschatology and how that word applies? And just let me hear what your eschatology is, and I'm going to let you know if Perusia is in there. And then you're going to have to think about, well, now I know how that word is used. Does that fit with second coming?
Without a Bible in front of me, I'm kind of unfamiliar with what verse you might be going over. Which verse is this a reference to that people are trying to say is the second coming?
Oh, well, those two particularly aren't in reference to second coming, but I'm going to go here, 1 Corinthians 16:17. So
because my memory is really bad, man. Like right now, I'm trying to write a book on Daniel 9, but if I was to go like a month without reading it, I would have trouble walking someone through it.
well, what might actually help is if you go a month without reading it, you will have questions. And then you can go look for the answers to those questions. Like, well, if it says this, does it say this? And then you go back to it and you'll have a better understanding of what you're reading, which helps you connect to what other people might have questions about. So starting with verse 15, now I urge you, brothers, you know that the household of Stephanus were the first converts in, I can't pronounce that word, and that they have devoted themselves to the service of the saints. Be subject to such as these and to every fellow worker and laborer. I rejoice at the Perusia, which is translated coming here, of Stephanus and Fortunatus and Archelaus. That's what it was, and they're from the town, because they have made up for your absence. For they refreshed my spirit. Now, refreshed as in it's past, as well as yours. So they had refreshed their spirit, and now they have in the past refreshed Paul's spirit. Give recognition to such people. They have made up for the absence of someone else. They are with Paul. They have refreshed his spirit by their Perusia, and yet it's translated coming. So how could their not yet arrival to Paul do these things? That lies the problem. And I've brought this up to somebody outside of talking about second coming. I just wanted to cover that word in this sentence or in this context to see what they think of it. And they said that Stephanus, Fortunatus, and Archelaus are with Paul at this time. They are not on their way to him. They are with him. And that's what this says in the Greek. It's like, okay, well, there you go. There's one instance in which I could say, look, even though it's translated coming, that's not what it means. And it's not even applied to Christ. It's not applied to God. It's applied to these three people. And then the second one, and this is Paul, who is a little bit better with Greek than other people. So he's going to use this word when it is appropriate. And he does very well. So 2 Corinthians 7, and I'll start with verse 5. For even when we came into Macedonia, our bodies had no rest, but we were afflicted at every turn, fighting without and fear within. But God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the parousia of Titus. And not only by his parousia, but also by the comfort with which he was comforted by you, as he told us of your longing and your mourning and your zeal for me, so that I rejoiced still more. Titus's parousia comforts Paul as Titus is telling Paul about his journey. He's not on his way to Paul. There's no way to say that this is coming, and yet there it is. And I think that it's there because the word parousia is there, and because somebody is very uncomfortable with saying that this is not coming, because they want it to apply to the second coming of Christ. And the more times you show that that's not what it is, the harder time you have to say that Jesus is talking about a return.
That's interesting. Yeah, because even if you want to say coming, like it would still be like in a past tense. Like, so, because I mean, I just wonder if it's like that's like a way they might have used it in Old English or something, or less modern English. They might have used it in that way where, and maybe people kept translating it that way, but maybe used to it meant like you already arrived, and they would say you're coming, but that doesn't mean like you're on your way of coming, or just like you've already gotten there. That's all I could think of.
Yeah, it's hard. So the reference that I had, which I think I got from BibleGateway.com, where they were talking about that, and maybe it was Wikipedia. It's in my notes and it's cited, but it says late 19th century the idea was popularized, but that doesn't mean that it didn't exist before that. And then one of the other things that I was saying is, for example, Justin Martyr is using the same language when he talks about it. So if it is about a second coming, then he is talking about a second coming. If it's not about a second coming, then he's not talking about a second coming, because it's the same language. So you can't say that he's in support of the idea. You can only say that he's repeating whatever the idea is. So at what point, and then there was a reference to Josephus, who does not use it. He does use the word, but he doesn't use it to talk about any sort of a return. There's no allusion, apparently, to his use of that word to be about a return of Christ. So going down the line, you either remove yourself from the Greek so you don't know what the word is in reference to, you don't know its use, you don't use it, or you're speaking a different language and now you have to decide what that word is translated to, and then you get coming, whether it's correct or not, but then you still have an opportunity to not have the idea of what it means, but rather just a translation. So there's no theology involved in translating. it would start when somebody reads it and then has a personal aha moment and goes, ah, look at this. This says coming. It must be Jesus must be coming back then. And then you teach that. And then the people that you teach that to have to learn it. And then they teach it. And then they teach it. And they teach it. And they so on and so forth. And then I don't have any idea how to trace that back, or if it's even possible to find the moment where that exists. But if it's not,
I was just gonna say, man, as far as the early church goes, I'm real careful about trusting using them too much as an authority, just because it feels like when I'm reading them, like when I'm reading the writings of Jerome and others, like it doesn't feel like they were exactly sure, like this was what so and so, like what John and all the apostles taught so and so, and so taught this, and so taught that. There's no a clear history of commentaries or anything. It's almost like they got disappeared, and then there's like some other group that starts trying to piece it together and teach what other, figure out what they were teaching, and or at least that's the feeling I get. The apostles
traveled enough that you have a cultural shaping from wherever they went to their words were used to apply to the culture they were talking to. And so they're going to have a different idea of what those words mean, even though the underlying truth is still there. The details are going to be a little different. So they're going to know what the gospel writers absolutely want them to know. But then there's little things that they're going to be like, well, did this mean this? And that idea is going to be like over in this area. So if you go to India, they're going to see something a little bit differently than what you're going to see over in Spain. But they're each going to have different ideas of certain things. And then collectively, you're going to see a bigger picture there, because you're going to have a percentage of agreement, just like what we have for textual criticism. When you look at, well, this word is used 98% of the time. Does that mean that the 2% that it's not used means that it's not a word that should be there? Well, no, because it's used 98% of the time. These texts agree that this word exists. Just because these other 2% don't, that means there's probably something wrong with this 2%. So what I'm looking at is, if the early church fathers are saying something, is the person translating what they're saying any different in their translation than what they do for the New Testament when they translate that? So if they already have the idea, and then they go to translating the church fathers, early church fathers, and what they have to say, are they inserting their idea in the translation?
Right.
I mean, not to turn this into a conspiracy, because I don't think that they're doing it to harm anyone. I just think it's something that you have to look at carefully, rather than just be like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to learn from them, and whatever they believed is what I should believe. Because we're still working on the text. We're still finding words that, like loan words in the Greek, that we're understanding better every day. And we should accept that, our ideas of these things could change.
Right. I'm pretty open to it, man. It's, yeah, my whole point about the early church fathers is, it's just that as I'm kind of like doing research for this book, it's like I see what they believe about eschatology, and it doesn't make sense. Some of it, doesn't. And these people are supposed like your most respected church fathers, And I'm just like, and they were teaching things I don't think adds up. And that's
Yeah.
and then you see about the persecution for like the quarter decimans, where it's like, okay, so Polycarp believed in keeping Passover on Passover, not Easter Sunday. He gets martyred and all this stuff. But then you got these other people who believe in keeping Easter Sunday and all this other stuff that's I can't really find in the Bible, right? And it's like, and then these people seem like they become the church fathers, and then it's like, but your quarter decimans, their like commentaries get, get destroyed, lost. Because there's some guy, man, it's like I really was curious about reading his commentary because you see other people quoting it, and it looks like he has the belief that I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but it looked like he had the belief that Daniel's 70th week was about Jesus. But all we got left is quotes from other people. We don't have his original commentary, and he was a quarter deciman, and I find that kind of interesting. That it's like we got these other people's works, that we're believing like Easter, Daniel's 70th week is future, but we got their stuff. But all these other people that looks like there's more biblical proof for what they believe, we just lost their stuff. So it's just that's why I kind of am looking more towards trying to figure out what some of these other groups believe, like your Ethiopians and stuff that were further away from Rome and might have been further away from the persecution. Because we also know, like the Jews, they were trying to rebel against Rome, and they had that whole thing happen in 70 AD. I'm guessing that the Jews weren't really. Most people didn't have much of a fondness for them at that time. So if you were a Christian and you might have been keeping Sabbath or might have been keeping Passover, chances are maybe you got the same persecution because you got lumped into the Jews or being a Judaizer. So if you wrote about things, well, maybe your writings get lost, get tore up, but maybe you had the right outlook, and then meanwhile, all these other people that weren't so Judaizing looking, and they're keeping Easter and all this other stuff. Well, we saved their stuff, and I just wonder if a little bit of something like that happened. I haven't done enough research to conclude that either way, but that's why I'm looking at what people were writing, like in Ethiopia and stuff that were keeping like that whole Passover on Passover instead of keeping Easter and things like that.
Yeah, I think Romans is a pretty good study on how to, like, it's celebrations, holy days, and things like that. If you're going to celebrate, and also First Corinthians, because basically what I think was happening is that Christians being free to just celebrate God's creation, even as they were having Gentiles be part of them, bringing their own traditions in, these things combined into new celebrations. So people will talk about, Christmas being, this pagan thing, and Constantine bringing it. Like, Christmas is related to the Magi reaching Jesus and giving him their gifts, which, if Jesus was born September 11th between 2 and 3 BC, then they would have arrived around December 25th of the next year and given him the gifts. It's like, okay, well, there was also at that time around, December, a winter solstice celebration that involved things that are applied to our Christmas celebration. Okay. Well, we're allowed to celebrate that as Christians because it gives glory to God, because he created it, because all things belong to him, and it brings us together. Now, are we going to remove God from the equation and say, well, we're celebrating this because it's pagan? Or are we going to say, hey, you people on the outside can celebrate with us because we want to celebrate the love of God? That's where that comes from. So if you go to Easter being on a certain day, is celebrated in a certain way, it's because we have the freedom to invite others in to learn what we believe and celebrate with them. And I think that's where those traditions come from, and in the way that they come from, because we don't do we, there's a lot of different things that the Hebrews celebrated, all the feasts that they had. It seems like it was like a never-ending party the entire year because of all the bad things that happened to them, and all the times that they were delivered from it created a celebration. But we don't do all of those. We could, but we don't.
Yeah, I'm just, I just don't, I just don't see like the early Christians celebrating Easter though. Like, I really feel like that's just
Yeah, I
something
think
that was
that's
added
something.
in,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like they applied something that existed to something else and created a new celebration out of it at
Yeah, now
some
I don't
point.
think it all started with Constantine. I mean, it may have, I haven't done enough
No.
research, but I feel like this is some other stuff that was done earlier, and then they just kind of made it more official whenever they started the Catholic Church.
Yeah, you might see things like that. Although I'm curious the history of the Catholic Church, because if you look at I don't know what they call it, the succession of popes, it seems like the first pope, the actual first pope, was somewhere in 500 AD.
I say 606. I would think Pope Gregory. That's just what I believe is it was Pope Gregory that was actually the first one. Because then the only reason why I say this is because oh, what's that one? Not Pope Gregory. It was Boniface, Pope Boniface the Third in 606, because Bishop Gregory has this thing he said. There's this quote in 604 AD, where he says the first bishop or first man to accept the title of universal bishop will be the precursor to the Antichrist. And to me, it looks like in 606, Pope Boniface III was the first one who accepted that title of universal bishop.
Okay, so that was going around. People were probably trying to establish one, and then that person addressed it, was like, hey, look, this isn't right. Yeah, that
Right.
makes
See,
sense.
that's what I think. And so you might see arguments where someone's like, well, this person was considered the official universal bishop in 400 or whatever, but I feel like it wasn't really well established until 606. Now, I mean, I could be wrong. You know, this isn't something I've done a crazy amount of study in. I just ran across that St. Gregory quote in 604.
Yeah. Well, there's
And
a
then I see,
huge gap because they'll start with Peter, and then there's a few other names over the years, and then there's just this giant gap of time before they pick it back up, as if to say that, oh yeah, don't look at this being something that continued. Look at this being something that started, and now we're picking it back up because it got lost somewhere. But you can't say that Peter was Pope.
right.
There's nothing that says that he was Pope. There's something that says he was an elder or an overseer, but nothing that says that he was a Pope.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I can't really add any points to that, man.
And what happened to all the funny names that popes used? Why'd that go away?
Oh, I mean, what do you mean by funny names? Like Pontifex Maximus or?
Have you seen their names? Some of them got really humorous because they get to change their name.
No, I was not aware of that. It's weird, man, because I study the Catholic Church is something I study a lot. Because I mean, I do call my channel the Protestant View, so it's like I'm really curious about anything about it because I really feel like they kind of oh crap, I took the wrong way. Oh crap. Nothing like missing my exit and I'm in a hurry. But yeah, man, see, I got really into the Catholic Church like years ago when I was trying to help this guy run for office. And he was bashing Lincoln really, really hard. And I did not know a thing about the Catholic Church really up until that point. And I was like, dude, I don't think you're ever going to win office if you keep bashing, Abraham Lincoln. And he kept saying he's a tyrant. So I got all these old books from the 1600s. And I came across like some stuff like Samuel Morse wrote. And, about the Catholic Church trying to take over America. And he's like the inventor of Morse code. And then I came across this other book by a brigadier general named Thomas Harris, who wrote about Rome's responsibility to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And he oversaw the trial of all 10 co-conspirators behind the assassination. And he said there was enough evidence to convict the Pope. And I was like, wow, I didn't know none of this. I better go tell this guy this. And then he goes and looks at me. He's like, well, that was written after the fact. And he dismissed it. And I was like, okay, I'm not even going to argue with you anymore because everything should be written after the fact of its history.
No, but so I've heard about that. What he's talking, it was a very small conspiracy among those 10 people who didn't act on the authority of anyone else. It really was. They wrote their own letters. All of the information was available for a court case. There's nothing tying any of them to a pope.
Oh yeah, well, not according to Brigadier General Thomas Harris.
I don't know what to tell you.
John Surratt was found hiding as one of the Pope's bodyguards.
That doesn't mean that the Pope had anything to do with the actual.
Well, they did end diplomatic relations with the Vatican in like 1864 over this, or 1860 something over it. That's why, right? Like they ended it all the way up until 1984, and that's when Ronald Reagan removed those laws and reestablished a Vatican embassy. And that was even printed in papers. That part of the reason why these laws were put in place was because of its involvement in backing the South and everything.
So I recently, because of anniversaries and things like that come up. It was a 2-year-old video, but I recently listened to a historian cover the JFK assassination, and he presented a scenario in which, while I was listening to it, I was thinking, what's the trick here? And he was talking about a bank robber and first talking about, this is the scenario that we have. This is all the things that are evidence that this person robbed the bank. And I'm thinking, okay. And then he said, but there are unknown circumstances, very odd things involved. And I was listening to the odd things and I was thinking, oh, okay, so what's the trick? How do these things somehow dismiss the facts? I don't understand. But the point was that they don't. There are odd things, but because the facts exist in such a way to prove this person's guilt of robbing the bank, the odd things have to be explainable. they're just odd. They don't mean that the facts don't exist. So when you look at things like that, I mean, the facts are there that the case was solved, that these 10 people were the conspirators, that they didn't work outside of their own group, because that's everything that they had to present it. Though there are some odd factors involved, they don't somehow dismiss that these people acted and wrote letters to themselves and their wives. John Wilkes Booth writing a letter to his wife before he did it, very not conflicted, very angry at the system and tyrants and things like that, and confessing to everything that he was going to do. But here I pulled up on the stream this official list thing that's posted, where it shows you have in 199 Saint Victor the First, and then in 461 Saint Leo the First.
Hold on, say that to me one more time. I had a lot going on around me.
You have in this list, this very official posted list of popes, and in the order of which they were popes, you have in 199 Saint Victor the First, and in 461 Saint Leo the First. Huge gap.
That's almost 200, yeah.
and I don't know why. This is supposed to be, of course we've had popes since Saint Peter. I don't know where you get that. But I was looking for something else, actually, which was the funny names that used to exist.
But to make a long story short, after I brought that information to that guy, I found out that he was Roman Catholic, and then I found out that the guys that they were having speaking at these events, they were all like Jesuit professors at Loyola University. So everyone that was like doing all this bashing, like they were all Roman Catholic, and I had no idea that like that many of them ran everything, until I was helping this guy on his campaign and I saw all that. But up until that point, I had no idea about any of this stuff. But that's what sent me down this path.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some things that I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of, because I don't have time, because there's too much to look into, because I don't have the resources.
Right.
Which is why I'm trying to live stream these things, so that I can get people here who do have time and resources.
That's what I was also trying to do, man, because it's like I started off because my channels kept getting banned. And so I've been in your situation where you're just like one guy streaming and you're just hoping someone finds your stream. And like you said, and you're looking for people who have resources, right? And who have time. Because my whole thing is, it's like I can, there's like things I want to provide people with, but I just did not. But my one thing is, I didn't have time, and I was just always trying to look for people who did have time, because I was like, hey, I got this way. If you're wanting to run for office, I just don't have time, but I can help you. But it started being one of those things, or hey, you want to start doing this sort of eschatology or whatever. Like I would have these ideas, but then it seemed like people were not. I don't know, man. It's like, it's kind of sad because you start to realize that there's not enough people digging that hard. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you'll see a lot of people. This is a strange phenomenon on YouTube. You'll see a lot of people watching people who call themselves prophets.
Yeah, making $2,000 an hour on donations.
Yeah. And
I've
then also banning people for questioning them.
Yeah, oh, that's what happened to me on Rumble, man. I was like, dude, this guy's so insane, dude. Like, because he's like, you know, your typical futurist preacher, but then he's adding things like, look, Biden's not president. That's a green screen, and Trump's still president. All this kind of stuff, right? Yeah, I'm sure you've heard all that kind of nuttiness, right?
Oh,
It's like,
yeah.
and I'm like, dude, how are you people giving this guy 2,000? And like the chat room's getting mad at me. I'm like, wow, dude, I'm asking a question. It's like I could understand him getting mad because I'm gonna about ready to kill his cash cow. But the chat room was like being vicious. I'm like, this is insane. You people passionately believe this guy like this, and you don't even want to hear anyone question him.
Yeah,
It's like,
it's very weird. I recently read through all the Psalms. There's stuff in there warning people against people like that. I'm reading through Proverbs right now, and there's stuff in there warning people against that. David and his son were warning people against those who behave this way, who love evil, who worship the dollar, basically. And then what do we have all the way into John's Revelation? A warning against people like this. They were still dealing with it. And we're still dealing with it today. And it's all written down. Just like read the book.
yeah, and the thing is, it's like these people seem so passionate. It's like you know what just gets me is if you're gonna be this passionate, like you would think you'd be more serious about wanting the truth, you know? It's like, but they're passionate about this, like this was the truth itself, and like this is like the ultimate pearl and the ultimate treasure, and like I don't know, they almost give me this feeling of like rabidness, ready to die for it, and I'm just like, this is just crazy.
Yeah.
Like how you can just throw money at it, and
Well, that's almost exactly what I was seeing with the Watchtower publications. There's a point at which they told people to, like, telling children, teens, not to go to college because they're not going to need it. They didn't want them learning anything. They wanted them to prepare themselves for like handiwork and stuff, because that's what we're going to need when society collapses and things like that. And it's just one of the ways that a cult would control somebody, is to remove them from any educational institutions and stop them from getting information outside of their own organization. But they were applying it to this idea that, you know, this is going to be the second coming, and no one alive today is going to die, but there's going to be all these bad things, and we'll have to rebuild, because they worship the earth and their things that are on it more. They love those things more than they love God. And that's what they expect, is to be here with their stuff forever. And I feel like it's not too dissimilar to the same idea that other eschatologies lend to, or take from even, is this idea that, well, why would Jesus need to come to earth and rule for 1,000 years?
right.
I don't get an answer to that. I never get an answer to that.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons too. I'm like into eschatology, is just because I feel like a lot of this has contributed to like the downfall of society. When you're like, I don't know, man. You think you're just gonna get raptured up, and you don't. There's like basically no I feel like people think there's no consequences really because they're just going to get raptured up, or things are starting to get bad, but let's not do something about it because that's just how it's supposed to be anyway.
Yeah, it removes you from your obligation of loving your neighbor.
Yes, that exactly.
That's actually I think almost a word for word line in my commentary. Because we were told to love one another, and then there's an escapist version of rapture where if you're rapture and then tribulation, then you escape the punishment that everyone else that uh, didn't believe what you believe gets punished. So there's no love for your neighbor there, because there's a I'm holier than you. Finally, I'm done with you. And then there's uh, there's sort of like a power play to the post trib rapture, because a lot of people see that tribulation like very similar to what in popular culture is called zombie apocalypse, which I disagree with that terminology vehemently. But the world is going to be at such a state where I am prepared to have power in it because I have God and he's not going to let me perish during this tribulation. We will survive the tribulation. We will endure and be saved. But there's still people that are going to be punished. And those are the people who don't believe. And at that point, it's too late for them to believe. So again, it's like, well, I'm above you now. And I can't wait until that moment where I'm above you. And there was a third version of that I don't remember, but there's escapist, there's a power play, and there is something else. But even if you don't exactly believe those, your idea of it, like if you even don't have a rapture in mind, those ideas still lend themselves to those people and the people that feel that way. That at some point you're going to be done with this. Oh, the kind of going along with the escapists, those who don't have to experience death because they're afraid of death. They're like, well, someday when all this happens, instead of dying, I'll just be in heaven, but it'll happen while I'm alive, so I don't have to die. And then if you're going to go to, like that Jehovah's Witness thing that I saw, where they're like, we'll live on this earth forever because then we'll have eternity on this earth. They just want to be around their stuff. They don't want to lose their stuff.
Hey man, I gotta cut out, man. Sorry to be so abrupt, but I'll be listening unless you just end the show. But I'll be listening.
Yeah, I've gone 2 hours. I'm still very much asleep. I don't know if I can keep going. And no one else is here. I'll try to do this because I've only gone 2 hours. I'll try to do this again sooner. Yeah, I'll get some rest. Probably not tomorrow, but a lot sooner. Well, and I might actually have an agenda by then. What would be nice is next time I do this, the only warning I'm going to have is that I'll schedule the stream. I will have a link to join pinned ahead of time. And if somebody joins in on that, we can talk a little bit and figure out what the stream's actually going to be about. I don't know why I didn't actually get anyone else coming in here and asking questions, though. That was happening recently. Anyway, thank you for joining me if you did. And you did. So thank you for joining me, Chris. And stay safe out there, Commonwealth.